Hello and welcome back to this second tutorial video on Garmin Pilot. And this time we're going to have a proper look at the main interface that we'll be using when we're operating with a Garmin Pilot, which is what we see on screen now, which is effectively the map view, which is where most people are going to spend most of their time when they're using the product. So let's just have a quick look around. So over here in the top left, we've got the home icon, which gives us access to all of the other functionality of the product. And we've got this direct to icon. And I've got a flight plan loaded, just a very simple flight plan to the 2K, just so we can see how some of this works. So if we press direct to, so the default it gives us is waypoints that are in the flight plan. Equally, if ATC told us to go somewhere, we can enter whatever that place is and go direct there. And you've also got these options: recent, nearest, favorite, and user waypoints. The next thing we've got is this nearest function. And if we press that, I think this is a super powerful feature actually in Garmin Pilot. So at the moment, it's showing the nearest airports to us. And if we touch one, it shows from my present position the distance and highlights it on the map. And also we can get some more information about that airfield as well. But as well as airfields, we get access to all sorts of useful information is as a nearest. So we can pull up nearest VORs, NDBs, intersections, VRPs, our user waypoints. We've also got this, this is maybe needs some explanation for the people using it in Europe. So we've got ARTCC, which I think is a very US term. Um, so that's an Air Route Traffic Control Center. So in Europe, that's probably not a lot of use because you can see here, it just brings up details for all the London control frequencies and flight service stations. So this is kind of useful here. You're going to most likely get frequencies for nearest airfields. But just so you know what those are, they're probably not massively useful in Europe, but probably hugely useful for people in the US. So that's the nearest function. So we can turn that off. Over here in the center of the screen, we always have the ability to get to the flight plan. So there's the flight plan that we've got loaded, and we'll go much more in depth into flight planning in a later video. This center function of the screen also can do other things other than the flight plan. So one of them is the stopwatch. So if we tap on the three dots in the top right of the screen, we've got the ability here. We've got stopwatch and timer. So if I bring on the stopwatch, you can see we've got a stopwatch ready to go. And if I press start, it will start counting up. If I press stop, it'll stop, tap to reset. And we can also set a countdown timer. So we can set a 10-minute countdown timer and it'll start counting down. So that's quite a useful little tool that we've got there ready to go. Coming across, we've got search. So that's a little bit like the nearest function, but nice to know we can get to it. And then we've got things which we talked about actually in some of the settings information in the first video. So we can quickly here turn the navigation info on and off at the top of the screen, depending on if we want to get to that. Show airspaces on flight plan. You'll notice whenever you create a flight plan, so we've got one here. I've got this big piece of text in the middle of the screen here, showing, basically telling me all of the airspaces that are on my flight plan, which is potentially useful. Or if you didn't want to see that, you could just turn off show airspaces on flight plan. What else have we got in here? The ability to turn on night mode, split screen. There's a couple of ways to get to that. We'll come to that later. Yeah, and that's pretty much all the information there. So next thing we'll have a look at is how we can get the map set up, how we like it for the sort of flight that we're doing. And this is an amazing feature of Garmin Pilot. It's super good. So we'll come to that in a second. Okay, so let's take a look at the map setup. So down here in the bottom left hand corner, we've got this overlays icon. So we open that up and we can have a look at the chart layers that we've got. And this is, as I said, a really great feature that Garmin Pilot has. So we can see we've got some choices of the map page, and we've got VFR, IFR, and we've got OpenStreetMap if we want. I haven't downloaded that. I don't really have a use for that. But the most important two that we're probably going to want to set up are these layouts here, the VFR and IFR. And the important thing to do is to press on the information icon, and then we can do some setup of the map itself. So particularly important for anybody using Garmin Pilot in Europe is the map colors or airspace colors that are being depicted on the chart. So standard is applicable for, I think, for the US, and most of the rest of us will be much more familiar with the ICAO colors. So I've obviously got mine set to ICAO colors. We can choose to have topography, so either off, shaded, or on. And then we can see if we move the map around, you see over here the Brecon beacons and so on. So we've got this shading, which is giving us an idea of where the terrain is. Then map type, IFR or VFR. So this is the layout I use for VFR, and we can actually change the name of this display if we want to. Then we can see what is actually displayed on the map. So if we go to the top of the airport section, and this sliding scale is the visibility that these things appear according to the scale that we've got set on the map. So at the moment, if we zoom right out, look, we can see that we're still seeing some of the bigger airports, but smaller airports have disappeared. So that helps to declutter the map a little bit as you're using it. So you've got the option large airports, medium airports, small airports, military, private, heliports, seaplane bases, so much stuff. Traffic patterns we'll have a look at in a second. Let's have a look into traffic patterns. These are a really great feature on Garmin Pilot as well. So if we zoom right into an airfield, we can actually see the circuit pattern for, or the preferred circuit pattern for my local airfield, Kemble. And you'll see if we zoom back out again, those traffic patterns disappear. And you can also change, the size of the labels and so on and so forth. So that's, I think, really cool. And I think this is probably something that people don't necessarily always delve into, and that's why they get a little bit confused with the mapping function. It's really powerful. The same thing again. So for VFR, I've still got VORs, TACANs, NDBs displayed, but I've got intersections that would be more relevant for potentially for IFR flying turned off. But you could, and we'll see if I turn en route intersections on. There we go. And we'll see those start to appear. So we'll turn those back off again. And then you can again set the label size for nav aids. Then you can depict what airspaces you want displayed on the chart, and also cities as well. So getting these set up in the way that's most helpful for your flying is a super powerful feature. And likewise, if we switch the view to IFR, I've got it set up slightly differently, and the same things apply. We can change all of the settings again. The other thing that's really very good is the ability to download, I guess, official charts. So I've actually got a subscription to the UK CAA chart and some European DFS charts. So if we turn that on as an overlay, we can now see that I've actually got the official UK CAA chart issued by NATS now visible. And if we go over here to Europe, I've got the DFS charts. So here we are in France, and you'll see how far that coverage goes, because if we zoom right out, that's basically the scope of that coverage. They're all optional purchases, and you can either purchase them through the app or you can purchase them on Fly Garmin. So we'll turn that back off for the moment, just so that we're using the standard product. Then we've got overlays, and overlays are really great. And again, knowing what you've got turned on and off is really important, because otherwise it can become quite confusing. So let's have a look what we've got here. So the first things we can overlay. So we can overlay weather radar. I haven't got a FISB source connected at the moment, but if we turn internet weather on, we can see some weather. We've got quite a lot of weather around in Europe at the minute. So we can see weather being overlaid. We've got the ability to put lightning on, and again, that can come from internet or FISB source. Terrain is an interesting one as well. So we can turn terrain on. And as you would expect, because I'm on the ground, we get a lot of terrain showing, but there's a really good feature as part of terrain, which is terrain planner. So we've got this terrain icon down now in the bottom right hand corner. And what this allows us to do, so if we're flying at 5,000 feet, then we could see, or if we're planning to fly at 5,000 feet, we could see really there's not very much terrain that's relevant. If we were to say we were going to fly at 1,500 feet, there's more terrain to be concerned about. So that's a really good feature whilst you're doing your flight planning, particularly if you're operating at potentially lower levels. And if we turn terrain overlay off, that option disappears. There's the ability to display shapes on the map as well, or basically shapes that you've defined in KML format. I'll probably do some work on how to use KML files in a separate video, but the way you could use those is if you're maybe a flight instructor and you have certain practice areas, you could define those with a KML shape. Map annotations is another great feature. So if we turn map annotations on, right now we have no annotations, but if I tap down here, we can get our pen up and we can write on the map. If we close that, the annotation stays. So that's quite useful if you want to, highlight something on your route. That's a really great feature. And you can turn map annotations off like that. And it's something that's tripped me up in the past, is trying to figure out, oh, why can't I write on the map? And it's because you actually have to have the map annotations on to open the drawing tools. Live track log, so you can basically see a breadcrumb trail of your flight if you want that in flight. We can also display cloud, so we can display that as internet IR, internet visible, FISB tops. And we can also display traffic on the map. I haven't got a traffic source connected, but you can have traffic displayed on the map as well, just by turning this on and off. NOTAMs, really useful to be able to display, obviously, on the chart in a graphical format. So if we turn that on, let's just zoom out a bit, turn that on and off so you can see that they appear on the map. So you can see we've got NOTAMs appearing. If we click here, we can get the details of that NOTAM. So that's really useful either flight planning or in flight, to be fair. So we turn that off. TFRs, obstacles. You can just decide to have those displayed or not displayed, and that again, that probably is determined by what sort of altitudes you're maybe flying at. Cap grids, that's probably more or only relevant for folks in the US. I actually had to go and look up what cap grids are. I think these are for the Civil Air Patrol. And there we go. There are the cap grids. Um, not relevant for Europe, as I say, but certainly for the US, and good to know what those actually do, so you're not confused by turning something on and not actually seeing it. The final column we've got here is we've got the options for the weather that we see on the airport stations. So I'll just get a couple into view here. So we can either have that color coded by the METAR or the TAF, or for people using Garmin Pilot in the US and Canada, you can also turn MOS on. I tend to leave it set as METAR, but again, it's all very optional. Icing, we have the ability to display icing forecasts, either from the internet or from FISB. And then we've got SIGMETs, PIREPs, fuel prices, or we can turn all of those off. So while we're talking about weather, there's another feature here. If you look down in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, we can see that I've got station ID set here, and that's referring to what's in these little boxes around the airfield. So if we look at Gloucester EGBJ, so it's currently set to station ID, we could actually set that to cloud ceiling or any of these settings. So temperature, visibility, wind gusts are all selectable. I tend to just leave it set to station ID, but it's a quick way to get to any of those pieces of information either at the planning stage or in flight. So the next thing we'll have a look at is filters. So filters are a really good way to declutter the chart. So here we have hide airspace above flight plan altitude. So we can either hide the airspace above the level that we're planning to fly at, or we can do hide airspace above a certain altitude. 5,000 feet is probably fairly normal for flying in the UK. We have a lot of airspace above that, certainly for VFR flying, so 5,000 kind of normal. If we do hide airspace above 15,000 feet, we'll see a lot more airspace appears. So if we're planning a VFR flight, we might want to declutter that down to 5,000. Dynamic airspace rendering. What that does is it de-emphasizes airspace and NOTAMs above and below the current flight altitude. So I tend to leave that on just to help with decluttering. Also, hide airspace above active flight plan altitude. That is kind of not compatible with hide airspace above, so having one on kind of negates the other. So it's a good idea to get that set up just how you like it. Filter NOTAMs based on active flight plan. So basically show only the NOTAMs that will effective during the ETE of the active flight plan with a margin outside. So if you've got flying at a specific time, you may want to turn that on. I tend to leave that off so that I get a good visibility of what's happening. Upcoming NOTAM visibility, you can change how far out they're being displayed on the chart. And you can turn certain NOTAM types on and off. So for instance, I'm hiding obstacle NOTAMs because they often cause a lot of clutter. And I'm also hiding the NOTAMs related to drone activity, because certainly in the UK, that's always done at low level. And the traffic filters, so unrestricted basically means that any traffic that's displayed will be at all altitudes. These are not really particularly well described, so I've looked these up, and let's have a look at what they mean, and I'll display these on screen as well. So above displays traffic up to 9,000 feet above the aircraft and 2,700 feet below the aircraft. So that would be useful to set during the climb phase of flight. Normal displays traffic 2,700 feet either above or below the aircraft. So that would be relevant for the cruise phase of flight. Or below means we start to look 9,000 feet below the aircraft and 2,700 feet above the aircraft. And you can also show a breadcrumb trail for traffic. And this is very much dependent on what your traffic source is. We'll delve into traffic systems and the various devices that you can get traffic into Garmin Pilot from. And that will very much, again, depend on what region of the world you're flying in and what capabilities are available to you. So next up, we've got radar IR color. I think that I'm going to have a look at that in a separate video on the weather features of Garmin Pilot. But effectively, this is allowing you to change how weather is depicted and what color scales and so on are being used. So we'll come back to that in a weather section. Opacities, this is super useful to help kind of declutter the map a bit. So let me just go ahead over here and turn the radar back on. So we can see right now, we can see quite a bit of weather here. And if I change the opacity of the radar, if I turn this all the way up, it becomes solid color, which obviously, if you're trying to use that section of the map, makes it a little bit more difficult. You can even you can turn it all the way down, so it's effectively not visible, or you can just change the level to make it suitable and things for easy to read. So that's what that function does, and you can do that for really for everything that we can put on in terms of overlays. So that's a really good feature. So you can put lots of things on the map, but tune the levels of display to make it really usable. So I think that's great, and there's lots of EFB products that don't have that kind of feature. The other thing that we should really look at, and I don't want to miss this, is going to filters. So one thing that I really like about Garmin Pilot is it gives you a really quick and easy way to see what filters you've got set. So if we look on the top left-hand corner of the chart page up here, we can actually see what we've filtered off of the flight plan. So it's now showing me, because we've got hide airspace above flight plan altitude with a margin of 5,000 feet, and we've got our planning to fly at 5,000. Our flight plan is for 5,000 feet. It's telling us that we filtered airspace above 6,000 feet. So if we turn that feature off, there we go. Hiding airspace NOTAMs at or above 5,000 feet. And I've seen other competitor products that are really not great at making it easy to see what you've turned on and off. And sometimes people get in a bit of a mess with that. So I really like that feature. And finally, looking at the general options for the chart. So we've got the night mode settings. So we can have it either auto, so it will switch at sunset, or we can turn it off, or we can turn it on. So if we have a look at what night mode looks like, I tend to leave it on auto. It tends to work pretty well. Auto zooming. So that starts zooming the map according to speed and the phase of flight that you're in. Stadium TFRs, not really relevant in Europe, but again, this is where you can turn them on and off in the US. Center with nav track just keeps the map centered on your nav track. contextual long press is effectively Garmin will try and bring up the most appropriate options depending on where you're pressing on the display. Always show map scale, so you can leave that set on so that you've always got the map scale displayed. And again, we've got here plates on map visibility, user waypoint visibility, obstacle visibility. So again, we can change that depending on the scale of the map size that we're using and whatever your preferences are for those. Always display nearby obstacles, so it will highlight obstacles that are near to our route, or you could turn that off if that's not relevant to you. Auto select layers based on connected devices. So what that does is if you've got a traffic system connected, it will turn on the traffic layer. Or if you've got a FISB device connected and active, you will choose to prefer to display FISB weather. And then auto select layer, time, altitude from active flight plan. Again, it will bring up the most appropriate layers based on the flight plan that we've got set up. So that really covers all the functionality of the chart display, which I think is probably where most of us will be spending most of our time when we're using the product. So hopefully that gave you a good overview of all of the huge amount of configuration options that we've got with Garmin Pilot. I think that's really one of its strengths. So I hope you enjoyed that one. Please do hit the like and subscribe buttons if you'd like to get notified of the next videos that get created. And next video will probably go into looking at flight planning. Thanks very much for watching and listening, and please leave your feedback of anything else that you would like me to cover in these videos.